All right, it's time for Sharper Square, where I lean on Chad Millman, CCO Action Network, to help me figure out and decipher good bets from bad bets. I mean, all bets are good bets. They're fun. And all odds provided by FanDuel. I mean, they make games fun. I'm betting on stupid bowl games. Of course they're fun. I always give you 3 or 4 I really like, and then you guide me through it. Then I ask you for advice on a game I want to bet. You often talk me into it. And then I ask you, what did I miss? So let's start with a couple I like. I like the Jets as a slight favorite against Seattle. Seattle is reeling. They're not running the football. When any quarterback the last 2 years not named Zach Wilson takes the helm for the Jets, they pass for over 310 yards a game. I think this is a really, really interesting roster. I think Mike White is capable. I'm going to take the Jets -1.5, sharper square.
Well, it's sharp. It's so sharp that the line has moved from 1.5 to 2.5 because the wise guy money has been coming in. At this point in the year, when you're handicapping games and trying to think about individual teams, you're trying to figure out, is the team that we've been watching for the past 6-7 weeks good if they're playing well, terrible if they're playing badly, or is there going to be some kind of regression, right? As bettors, we're always trying to ride the wave and predict regression. A team going to be, better than it's been playing or worse than it's been playing. I think wise guys right now feel like what you're seeing with the Seahawks the past 4 or 5 weeks, inability to run the ball, defense can't stop anybody, Geno Smith being exposed for the reasons why he's been a backup for 7 years. And the Jets, meanwhile, are a team that continues to play well because they've got a top 5 defense, and they're top 5, like front line, linebacker, secondary. And the only reason why they can't compete in some games is because of Zach Wilson. And it's a testament. It's really about how bad Zach Wilson is.
Yes.
That you get Mike White in there and people are like, this is a Super Bowl contending team.
Right.
And in reality, it's Mike White, who's still Mike White. He's just so much better because he can actually complete a pass. So you're on the right side. It's an interesting game to handicap just because of the Seahawks troubles, but the wise guys like the Jets.
So speaking of growth and throughout the season, I never thought Christian Watson would matter in a pick. But if he does not play, Green Bay is a completely BB gun offense. And I like Minnesota +3. If he does play, it's probably a push. But he's become a wildly important part, really the only part to their vertical passing game. He's a 50-50. I'm going to take Minnesota +3 here, sharper square.
Totally. It's interesting. We do that sharp call segment on the favorites, me and Simon Hunter, professional bettor. So I'll explain it for people who don't listen to this segment every week. We'll do 2 podcasts a week. On Tuesday, we talk about the games we like. On by Thursday, we have gotten calls from other professional bettors in the community telling us what they think of the games we're talking about. And sometimes they're affirming our decisions. Sometimes they're against our decisions. There were 2 games that popped this week. I think we're going to talk about both of them. This is one of them. Completely split. Some wise guys love the Packers. Some guys liked the Vikings at 3.5 because they were getting the hook. And we saw that line move. It was at 3.5. It went down to 3. So I feel there's not a consensus here. If you like the Packers, you're probably on the right side with some professional bettors. I think what people are thinking is it's a little bit about that wave. The Packers have been ascending. And because of Christian Watson, because their offense has been playing much better with Aaron Rodgers and sort of understanding what those receivers can do, they've been getting a little bit healthier on offense. They've got a very good defensive secondary. And I think like the biggest difference here with the Vikings is their luckiness has been factored into the line. And that's why if it's a 3, the wise guys don't like it. At 3.5, they do. I will tell you, we've talked about this in the past. We've got this metric called the luck rankings at Action Network that basically is able to quantify regression. And the differentials and luck rankings between the 2 teams, when it's 16 or more, the team that is less lucky covers 62% of the time. This is the biggest luck differential of the week. So, and it's in favor of the Packers. So I think that's giving some of us a little bit of pause for going all in on the Vikings. By the way, you mentioned betting is fun. This is when betting is hard. When you have Christian Watson over 50.5 receiving yards and he gets 49 in the first half, and on the last catch of the first half that he makes, he's knocked out of the game. That's when you're standing in front of the TV and you're like, I don't see him on the field when the Packers have the ball to start the series in the second half. This is terrible.
Yeah, happens all the time.
By the way.
Yeah, all the time. So since week 7, if you've watched Patriot games, they have no offense. The play calling, no vertical element. They now turn it over more. Protection's hit and miss. I still like Miami's personnel. And Tua won't play, but Bridgewater's a reasonable facsimile. I'm going to take 2.5 points. It just feels like the right side. They match up very well. They've got more juice. I saw them play at Buffalo and outplay the Bills. I take Miami plus the point, sharp or square.
Yeah, that's totally sharp. And what's really interesting here, and I imagine we'll talk about this with another game, QBs are obviously the most important factor against the spread. And if you're one of the top tier QBs, you're anywhere worth 7 points to 10 points against the spread. Tom Brady at his peak, Aaron Rodgers at his peak was considered to be 7 to 10 points against the spread. And it quantifies two things. It quantifies how good you are as a quarterback, but also the delta between you and your backup. And I think what you're seeing here is the market responding to Teddy Bridgewater playing. Teddy Bridgewater, and I'm not exaggerating here, greatest against the spread record of any quarterback the past 20 years. So they call him Teddy Covers, right? So there's going to be a sentiment that the Dolphins are still going to be the side you want to take. It's why this line has been sitting at 2.5 and it hasn't moved to 3. Part of it is because nobody's got any faith in the Patriots offense. And part of it is because they know that Teddy Bridgewater can come in and do a lot of the things that they need him to do to keep the game close.
So Josh McDaniels is a very good play caller and I think play designer, but his opinion on quarterbacks is interesting. At one point, Belichick was ready to move off Brady for Garoppolo. Obviously, Bill went to McDaniel for his opinion, probably emboldened in power because Bill was over Tommy and McDaniel liked Garoppolo. We know he's now limited. Josh McDaniel also loved Tim Tebow. Nobody else in the world did as a first-round pick. Josh McDaniel likes Jarrett Stidham, who has a 52% completion percentage in his career. In the preseason was at 62, but it's deceiving because we live in an era now, last 2 years, no starters play in the preseason. It is mostly second, third teamers and scout teamers. That's a bad percentage. I'm going to take San Francisco minus 9.5. It makes me sick. I don't know how the Raiders move the ball. I don't understand it. Bad line. Stidham's not mobile. I don't get it. I'm taking the Niners. Sharp or square?
You hit on something really interesting. It's a square play, but you hit on something really interesting, which is people who have had success in whatever capacity in which they need to coach somebody up. Could be a media executive, which you are now, which I have been for a while. Could be an NFL coach. Could be an NBA coach. You see something in someone once. You see it in practice. You see them execute well. You see them write a line that you love. You hear a segment of theirs on a podcast or on a radio show, and you're like, that person's got it. And you will believe in that long past the time when they've proven they don't have it. And it's very possible that in these instances, Josh McDaniels just believes, I'm so good at what I do, I can intuit, I can impart all of that information into the person who can be robotic. If they just do what I tell them to do, it's going to be perfect. So I was talking about the delta in against the spread value for quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Before the season began, we ranked all this at Action Network. The delta between Derek Carr and Jarrett Stidham was about 6 points. So let's say you downgrade Carr because he's underperformed a little bit this year. So let's say it's 4 points, right? So then That's how you get from 5.5, which is what this line was in favor of the Niners before the news about Derek Carr, to 9.5. So I will tell you right now, when it got to 9.5, professional bettors started betting on the Raiders. And you can see in some places, not everywhere, but in some places, this line has moved to 9. Like, you always say you don't want to bet games like this. I'd probably have to take the Raiders here, but I'd hold my nose. And then I think there's better options on the board.
Finally, Bengals at home, probably one of the 3 biggest football games in Cincinnati in a decade. They're the more efficient team. They have the better protection for their quarterback, the more consistent run game. What concerns me about Buffalo, they bail on the run, their protection spotty. As Greg Cosell told me this week, Josh Allen's taking off now sooner than he has to, and they're very prone to mistakes in key red zone situations. I think Cincinnati is the best team in the league, and I'm going to take him at home plus 1.5. Not that I'm a seller on Buffalo. This is a playoff level intensity. That this crowd, this moment, Cincinnati, Monday Night Football, nobody puts Cincinnati on Monday Night Football. I think it's going to be an overwhelming presence, and I'm going to take the team I think will make fewer mistakes in potentially a shootout.
All right, so I said at the beginning of this segment, we were going to refer back to a couple of different ideas, right? One was against the spread value for quarterbacks. The other was sharp calls. This was the second most called about game, and it was pretty unanimous. The wise guys were on Buffalo. Mm-hmm. And it's pretty interesting. I think there's a couple different things in play here. One, the Bengals are without their best offensive lineman, which is a really big deal. As good as Joe Burrow is against the blitz, against pass rush pressure, they're still down their best offensive lineman. We saw last week, and you and I talked about this, the defensive line has been the key to the resurgence for the Bengals the past, say, 6, 7, 8 weeks. They're a little bit banged up. In fact, significantly banged up on the defensive line. That plays to the strengths of the Bills. It might allow Josh Allen to have a little bit more time, but also is going to leave gaping holes for him to do what he really does best, which is finding open lanes in which to run. And I also think the Bills have not played great this year, but you've seen them dominate late in the game, not because the other teams are making mistakes. They're dominating late in the game against really scrappy teams. They did it against the Browns, who were staying close. They did it against the Bears, who were staying close. They did eke out that win against the Dolphins in really weird circumstances. They did eke out that win against the Lions on Thanksgiving in really weird circumstances. So to me, the Bengals are often winning because the other teams are making so many mistakes, right? We saw it with the Bucs, 4 turnovers. They come back from 17 down. We saw it last week. You talk about betting isn't any fun. I love the Patriots at 3.5. They lose by 4. They miss 2 extra points. They fumble the ball on the 5-yard line with a chance to go ahead with a minute left, right? So the Bengals aren't winning because they're dominating. The Bengals are winning because other teams are making mistakes. The Bills are winning because they're playing the best at the end of the game.
All right, now I go to the what would you do game that I strongly considered. Browns at the Commanders, Cleveland getting points. I refuse to watch the Browns because of their quarterback and the egregious claims against him by 24, 25 women. I'm just turned off completely by that franchise. But as a number against the Commanders, I do think Taylor Heineke, we've got a lot of film and there's real limitations. And I think Deshaun Watson, who I was never a huge fan of as a pure passer, has got a little more to work with here. I just feel like Cleveland's the better team. They'll win this game. It feels like a sharp play. What would you do on this? I didn't include it, but what would you do?
I would play the Browns. I'm still debating it. A lot of times, when I'm thinking about the games that I want to play, and I've got a list of games that I'm considering, I'm waiting to see which way the market goes and if I can get a better number. So right now, the Browns, they're a plus 2.5. The wise guys like the Browns. I was kind of hoping to get it at 3. It's actually moving in the other direction. So you're seeing the wise guys coming in on the Browns right now. I think there's a lot of sentiment that just agrees with you. There's a little bit too much weaponry for what Deshaun Watson can do. They're literally banking on him getting a little bit better. But there's also a lot of research and a lot of data and this applies to a few games this week, of which I'd love to try to convince you. When you were a team that is out of contention, playing a team that has an opportunity, you back the team that is out of contention. It's not what people would normally expect. And I think that's why you end up getting the point spread value in a game like Cleveland, is because there is a lot of precedent for backing the team that's out of contention.
Finally, what did I miss, Chad Millman, Action Network?
Oh my God, where to begin? Do we want to talk about the Bears +6? Do we want to talk about the Colts +5.5?
Oh,
Can we talk about the Denver Broncos
I can't.
12.5 against the Kansas City Chiefs?
That's not even a corner TV game. That is a corner at the neighbor's house. I can see it through the window game. I can't watch Denver games. It's so discouraging.
Look, I think I am going to bet the Broncos. It's one of those games where I'm kind of just hoping. It's a 12.5 right now. It might end up being one of my biggest bets of the week. And I'm honestly just going to wait until Sunday, late afternoon, early games are ending. People are feeling flush. They go in and they pound the Chiefs, and this line gets back up to 13 or even higher. Like in the afternoon, they call that chasing a little bit. You get a lot of chasing on Sunday night games. People won or they lost. They're trying to win back some money. They do it on Sunday night. They do it on Monday night. They do it on the afternoon games too. So, look, I've just said over the past 32 years, Colin, 32 years, eliminated teams in the final 2 weeks of the season, playing teams that are much, much better than them. So huge sort of win differentials. They're covering at a 62% clip. Okay. Let me give you some more. And this, I'll make it as simple as possible. The Broncos are coming off a terrible loss. Past 20 years. Teams coming off a terrible loss, 35 or more, covered a 70% clip. And these are not small sample sizes. I'm not throwing at you like, going back to the dark ages. These are legitimate sample sizes. So, it's going to be hard for me not to back the Broncos. And I'd like you to join me.
Can't. Listen, there's always a friend that offers you to go on a road trip and you pass. As Jerry Jones would say, El Paso. That was his line. Michael Irvin once said, "This is what I want," and slid a paper across. And Jerry Jones said, "One of my favorite cities and one of my favorite expressions, Michael, is El Paso." I'm going to pass on that contract.
He is not afraid, Jerry Jones.
Yeah, it's an interesting week. I just don't take big numbers. The Niners thing. One of the things that really interests me just as a broadcaster, I'm always fascinated by what's next. I don't talk regular season baseball. I don't romanticize sports. It just doesn't appeal to me. There's a lot of hosts that love it. I get it. I'm not bothered by it. It's not me. And preseason quarterback numbers now, they were always a little sketchy. I look at them now. If you're average in preseason, you're bad, because Sean McVay over the last 6 years, there are no more starters, even week 3. So we're down to 3 games. And a lot of times it's just scout guys and fourth stringers. So I look at that Stidham preseason number and I'm like, God, 62% preseason. And by the way, he knows McDaniel's offense from New England.
I know. But this is when, look, the needle you're always trying to thread as a bettor is an obnoxious number versus bad players. And what is the public going to be thinking? What is the threshold that makes you uncomfortable? And then betting on that. Betting is doing bad things. Betting is doing things that make you uncomfortable, right? It's why I've been on the show and I said the Rams are 8.5 point underdogs to Seahawks. We got to take them. The Bears are huge underdogs to the Eagles. We got to take them. The Broncos are huge underdogs to the Chiefs 2 or 3 weeks ago. We got to take them. It's just what you got to do. And like, look, the truth is, if it's working out 60% of the time, that's a massive number. You just got to win 53% of the time and you're profiting. Like, you're one of the best bettors in the world. So sometimes it's not going to work out, but that's what you got to do.
Blazing 5 is on Friday. I've always argued I try to hit 55% a year. I'm on that pace. If it was on Monday, I think I'd hit 57%. I'll never be a pro bettor, but that's the difference between making a little scratch and losing money. So I tell people who say, oh, you missed on Blazing 5. I'm getting the worst number. Almost always. I'm getting absolutely a terrible number. Like, for instance, Niners-Raiders was much better number earlier in the week. And then all of a sudden, the Derek Carr thing. And
it's hard. It's really hard. And look, we joked about it with Christian Watson. Those half points, those half yards, they matter. Just look at this past weekend. The Eagles opened at 6 as 6-point underdogs against the Cowboys, went down to 5.5. I bet it at 5.5. The Eagles were up by 10 in that game twice. They had the ball twice in the final 5 minutes, turned it over twice. They gave up a 3rd and 30. They lost that game by 6. I mentioned the Bengals. I mean, the Patriots against the Bengals. They were 3.5-point underdogs. I bet it at 3.5. They lost by 4 on some fluky plays. It goes the other way too. You only remember the times when it's terrible, but the times that when it's terrible really hurt quite a bit. And that's when you remember, I really should get the best of the number.
Best to you and your fam. Chad Millman, Action Network, odds provided by FanDuel. Happy holidays, buddy.
Happy New Year, my friend.